I never thought it would happen to me. As Eleanor, a 34-year-old female living in Willow Creek, my life felt perfectly ordered and predictable. I was a calm, career-driven woman, meticulously planning my days and my future with my husband, Marcus. Our house was filled with quiet comfort, our weekends spent on thoughtful projects or peaceful hikes. I felt secure, loved, and on the right path. Marcus was my rock, or so I believed, and my sister Chloe was my closest confidant, always there for me, or so I thought. We were a tight-knit family, and I trusted them with everything, including my heart, my history, and my hopes. This trust was the foundation of my entire world, and I built my life carefully upon it, never imagining it could be so completely shattered. Then, things started to feel a little off, like a tiny crack appearing in a perfect window pane. One evening, Marcus came home later than usual, his clothes looking a little rumpled, and he carried a faint, sweet scent with him, a smell I knew far too well. It was coconut lotion, the kind Chloe always used, her signature smell, something she'd worn since we were teenagers. My stomach gave a little lurch, a tiny flutter of unease that I immediately tried to push down. It was probably nothing, I told myself, just a coincidence, a scent clinging from somewhere else. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it began to grow. A few days later, while doing laundry, I found a hotel receipt tucked deep into Marcus's jacket pocket. It was from the fanciest hotel downtown, the kind of place you went for special occasions, or, as he often said, for important client meetings. When I asked him about it, his voice was smooth and even explaining it was indeed for a big client meeting, a late night, and he'd just forgotten to expense it. He looked me straight in the eye, and for a moment I almost believed him completely. My heart wanted to believe him, but the seed of doubt kept growing, thorny and sharp. Later that very same night, as I scrolled through Instagram, I saw Chloe's story pop up. There she was, smiling brightly, posing in the lobby of that exact same hotel, the one Marcus claimed was for a client meeting. The date on the receipt matched the date on her post. My breath caught in my throat, a cold dread washing over me. It felt like the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. This wasn't just a coincidence anymore, it was too specific, too chilling. My calm composure began to fray around the edges. I felt a rising panic, a desperate need to make sense of what I was seeing, to put the pieces together in a way that didn't spell out betrayal. My mind raced, trying to find any other explanation, any way to make it all just a big misunderstanding. The next day, my confusion and fear were overwhelming, and I did what I always did when I felt lost. I turned to my family. I went to my mom's house, which was also in Willow Creek, where my aunt was also visiting. I sat them down, my voice trembling slightly as I laid out what I'd found, hoping they would help me make sense of it, hoping they would reassure me that I was wrong, that my husband and sister would never do such a thing. Instead, their reactions were like a slap in the face. My mother sighed, a familiar, exasperated sound. "Eleanor," she said, her voice laced with a gentle but firm dismissal, "you've always been so emotional. Don't ruin your marriage over nothing." My aunt nodded in agreement, her eyes pitying me as if I was being foolish. Their words were like a physical blow, invalidating my feelings, twisting my legitimate concerns into something I was imagining, something I was creating out of thin air. I felt completely gaslit, like I was losing my mind, like my own reality was being stolen from me by the very people I trusted most. They made me feel foolish, paranoid, and hysterical for simply noticing obvious discrepancies. Their dismissal, instead of calming me, ignited a cold fury deep inside. It wasn't fair. They weren't seeing the truth. They were actively helping me to doubt myself. This wasn't about being emotional. This was about something very real and very wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed their words, their expressions, and then Marcus's calm lies, Chloe's cheerful post. The betrayal wasn't just from Marcus, and it wasn't just from Chloe. It was from my own mother, who was supposed to be my protector. A steel resolve began to form inside me. If they wouldn't believe me, if they would gaslight me, then I would find the truth on my own. I started keeping meticulous notes, logging every strange look, every late arrival, every fleeting scent. I screen-recorded Chloe's Instagram stories, archiving them like evidence in a case. I started checking Marcus's bank charges online, looking for anything out of place, anything that didn't fit his client meeting narrative. My calm, career-driven nature, which had once been about building, now turned to investigation, to a desperate hunt for clarity. I was no longer just a wife. I was a detective in my own life, desperately searching for the facts that would prove I wasn't crazy. My initial attempts to just talk it out with Marcus had been met with calm, rehearsed denials, each one chipping away at my sanity. "You're imagining things, Eleanor," he would say, his hand gently touching my arm, his eyes clear and seemingly honest. "Work has been stressful, I'm just tired." He painted a picture of me being paranoid, and I, desperate to believe him, almost fell for it. When I gently tried to ask Chloe about her new boutique, which had sprung up so quickly and lavishly in Willow Creek, she just smiled and said, "Just good luck, sis. You know I've always had a knack for business." She sounded so innocent, so proud, and I felt a fresh wave of doubt wash over me, wondering if I was truly just jealous or insecure. My mother's continued dismissals, her repeated lines about my overactive imagination, felt like a constant drip of poison, slowly eroding my self-trust. Each time I tried to confront any of them, even softly, I was met with such a wall of innocence, such a united front of dismissal, that I started to truly question myself. I'd lie awake at night, replaying conversations, wondering if I was the problem, if I was indeed emotional and ruining things. The gaslighting worked its magic, turning my gut feelings into self-doubt, making me feel isolated and increasingly fragile. My failed attempts to just talk it out or understand only made everything worse, pushing me further into a corner of quiet desperation where I felt completely alone, my family now part of the problem instead of the solution. This crushing loneliness and relentless self-doubt were what finally propelled me to take a drastic step, a step I never imagined I'd have to take. I knew I couldn't fix this by myself, not when everyone around me was telling me I was broken. I needed an outside eye, someone who could see clearly what I was struggling to define. I found Liam, a private investigator, through a discreet online search. His office was quiet, his demeanor calm and professional, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. I poured out my story, every detail, every suspicion, every painful interaction, watching his expression remain neutral, a stark contrast to my mother's dismissive sighs. He listened patiently, taking notes, asking precise questions, and when I was finished, he simply nodded. "I can help you find answers, Eleanor," he said, and those words felt like a lifeline in a stormy sea. The 2 weeks that followed were excruciating. Every phone call from an unknown number made my heart leap. Every notification on my phone sent shivers down my spine. I tried to maintain my calm exterior, to go to work, to pretend everything was normal, but inside, I was a coiled spring wound tighter with each passing day. Then, the call came. Liam's voice was steady as he delivered the news, but his words hit me like a physical blow, each one a hammer stroke shattering my carefully constructed world. "Eleanor," he said, "I have the confirmation you were looking for." He proceeded to lay out the cold, hard facts. Marcus and Chloe had been having an affair for over 6 months, a calculated, ongoing betrayal right under my nose. My husband, the man I loved, and my sister, the one I shared my childhood with, my confidant. But the horror didn't stop there. Liam continued, detailing how Chloe's fancy new boutique, the one she claimed was a stroke of good luck, had been funded by my trust fund, money that was never, ever supposed to be touched, money my grandparents had set aside specifically for my future, carefully protected for generations. The sheer audacity, the depth of this betrayal, made my head spin. He explained the money trail, showing forged documents, my own mother's signature on several approval letters, enabling the theft, making her a direct accomplice. My banker uncle, who was supposed to be the guardian of my trust, had clearly been complicit, looking the other way, or worse, actively participating. I was utterly devastated. It wasn't just Marcus, and it wasn't just Chloe. I had been betrayed by my husband, my sister, my mother, and even my banker uncle. My entire family, the very people I had always depended on, had conspired against me, lied to me, stolen from me, and then gaslit me into believing I was crazy. The world I had known, the people I had loved, were not real. They were actors in a cruel play, and I was the unsuspecting audience. The pain was unbearable, a sharp, searing agony that cut through every part of me. But beneath the devastation, a new feeling began to stir. It was cold, sharp, and resolute. They thought I was emotional. They thought I was crazy. They thought they could get away with it. They were about to learn just how calm and career-driven I could be when my world was destroyed. The time for being gaslit was over. The time for quietly collecting evidence was over. Now, it was time for them to face the truth. The plan formed slowly, meticulously, piece by painful piece. I needed to confront them all, not individually, where they could dismiss me, but together in a way that would leave no room for denial or gaslighting. The family Sunday dinner at my mother's house in Willow Creek was the perfect stage. It was a tradition, a sacred gathering, a place where our family facade was always presented as perfect. Everyone would be there: Marcus, Chloe, my mom, my cousins, and my uncle. I spent days compiling the evidence Liam had given me, organizing it into a pristine digital folder on my phone. CCTV footage, bank statements, forged documents, emails from the lawyer explaining the trust fund irregularities. Each file was a dagger, sharpened by betrayal. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would act, maintaining a calm, almost serene exterior while a storm raged inside me. My best friend Maya was the only person I confided in, and she held my hand, listening to my every word, bolstering my resolve. Liam was also a quiet pillar of strength, providing not just evidence but also advice on how to proceed. Sunday arrived, and the air was thick with a deceptive normalcy. The smell of my mother's roast filled the house in Willow Creek, laughter echoed from the living room, and Marcus sat beside me at the dining table, occasionally placing his hand on my knee, acting the part of the loving husband. Chloe was across from me, bright and cheerful, talking about her boutique. My mother beamed, proud of her seemingly perfect family. Halfway through the meal, just as everyone was comfortable, relaxed, and oblivious, I stood up. The scraping of my chair against the floor seemed incredibly loud in the otherwise jovial atmosphere. All eyes turned to me, a sudden silence falling over the table. I walked calmly into the living room, where the large smart television dominated the wall. With a few taps on my phone, I selected the AirDrop option and sent the carefully curated folder of images and PDFs to the TV, which was already connected to our home network. The screen flickered, and then the first image appeared: clear, undeniable CCTV footage of Marcus and Chloe entering the downtown hotel together, their hands intertwined, a look of casual intimacy between them. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Marcus's face went white, Chloe's jaw dropped. My mother's eyes widened in horror. I didn't say a word, simply letting the images play, one after another. Screenshots of Chloe's boutique bank account flashed across the screen, showing enormous transfers directly linked to my trust fund. Then came the emails, forwarded from the lawyer, detailing the forged approval letters, explicitly naming my mother and my uncle as the signatories. The room fell into a deathly silence, broken only by the soft click of the images changing on the screen. The evidence was irrefutable, undeniable, a brutal expose of their deceit laid bare for everyone to see. Cousins exchanged stunned glances, my uncle looked like he might faint, and my mother's face was a mask of shame and fury. Finally, my mother, her voice trembling, broke the silence. "Eleanor," she whispered, her eyes pleading, "you need to keep this in the family." Her plea was not for me, but for her own reputation, for the shattered illusion of our perfect family. I met her gaze, my voice steady, betraying none of the earthquake raging inside me. "You should have thought about family before stealing mine," I replied, my voice cutting through the thick silence like a knife. I sat back down at the table, my meal untouched, the silence deafening. The family dinner, once a symbol of unity, had become the battlefield where I reclaimed my truth. The shame, the anger, the shock on their faces was a bitter, fleeting satisfaction. The fallout was immediate and devastating, a complete implosion of the life I had known, but this time I was holding the detonator. The next day I didn't hesitate. I filed a civil lawsuit against Chloe and Marcus for fraud and theft, demanding every penny of my trust fund back, along with damages for the emotional distress and the outright betrayal. My legal team moved swiftly, and within days I obtained a court order to freeze the boutique's bank account. Chloe's dream business was shut down overnight, its doors locked, its future uncertain. The scandal, once confined to our family dinner, quickly leaked. Someone from the dinner, perhaps a cousin horrified by the revelations, must have talked. Marcus's affair and the financial fraud made headlines in Willow Creek. His firm, valuing its reputation, swiftly terminated his employment. The man who had been my rock, my partner, was now jobless and disgraced. My mother's meticulously curated social circle in Willow Creek imploded. The whispers turned into shouts, the pitying glances turned to judgment. Her friends, once so loyal, began to distance themselves, unwilling to be associated with such a public display of betrayal and complicity. To my surprise, many of my relatives, those who had been present at the dinner and seen the irrefutable evidence, began siding with me. They saw the cold, hard facts, the undeniable truth, and they felt the sting of having been manipulated just as I had been. Their support, however small, was a balm to my raw wounds. In the wreckage of my old life, only two people stood by me unconditionally. Maya, my best friend who had always believed in me, and Liam, the private investigator who had helped me uncover the truth. They were my anchors in the storm, reminding me that I was not alone, not crazy, and not broken. But my need for justice, for truth, extended beyond just my immediate circle. I wanted to tell my story, not for revenge, but for validation, for healing, and to prevent others from suffering the same fate. I connected with a popular podcast that focused on stories of betrayal and resilience. I decided to tell my story publicly, anonymously at first, protecting my exact identity, but sharing every painful, gaslighting detail. The episode aired, titled with a phrase that perfectly encapsulated my journey. I was gaslit by my entire family until I turned their secrets into evidence. The response was overwhelming. The episode blew up, going viral within days. My inbox was flooded with messages from strangers, from women who had experienced similar betrayals, similar gaslighting, similar financial abuse. Their support was a tidal wave, lifting me up, empowering me. I continued to share my story, turning it into a viral series, shedding my anonymity as I gained confidence. I spoke not just about betrayal, but about the insidious nature of gaslighting, about financial abuse, about finding the strength to trust your instincts even when your entire world tells you you're wrong. My voice, once silenced by my family, now resonated with thousands. I was invited to speak at a financial abuse awareness event, sharing my journey from victim to survivor, from silence to advocacy. The interest grew, and soon a book deal followed, a chance to put my full story with all its painful lessons and hard-won triumphs into the hands of countless others. My career, once calm and predictable, now had a new, profound purpose. I was no longer just Eleanor, the betrayed wife. I was Eleanor, the voice of resilience, the advocate for truth. Months later, the legal battles were ongoing, but the future was clear. My book was well underway, speaking engagements were lining up, and my voice was stronger than ever. One afternoon, I found myself walking past the downtown stretch in Willow Creek where Chloe's boutique used to be. It was empty now, a hollow shell. The storefront was dark, the windows dusty, and a stark, white sign was taped crookedly to the glass. In bold, block letters, it read, "Closed for legal reasons." I stopped, looking at the sign, a profound sense of closure washing over me. The coconut lotion scent, the hotel receipt, the gaslighting, the trust fund betrayal, the family dinner, it had all led to this. My family had tried to make me disappear, to make my truth disappear, but they had failed. They had underestimated the quiet woman who believed in evidence. A faint smile touched my lips, and I whispered, so softly only the wind could hear, they said I was crazy. Turns out I was just right too early. The street was quiet, but for me, the silence was no longer deafening. It was liberating.